Local security sources say 11 Turkish soldiers have been killed and dozens more injured in two attacks blamed on the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Observers say the Turkish army's hierarchy has been badly hit in a purge that followed from the 15th of July failed coup against the government. During the failed coup attempt, tanks rolled onto the streets of Istanbul and Ankara, while a rogue military faction tried to oust President Recep Tayyip Erdogan from power. More than 260 people were killed. The PKK appeared to de-escalate its attacks immediately following the coup, but has since revved up its attacks. Nearly half of all generals have been imprisoned or dismissed, raising concerns about the coordination of the fight against Kurdish rebels. However, government sources stressed that the army had not been badly hit and that the military would be able to continue operations, as well as its commitment to NATO. More than 600 Turkish security personnel have been killed by the PKK since the collapse of a ceasefire last year, according to a toll given by state-run Anadolu news agency on the 31st of July. The government has responded with military operations against the group, claiming to have killed more than 7,000 PKK fighters in Turkey and northern Iraq. Over 40,000 people on both the Turkish and Kurdish sides have been killed since the PKK first took up arms in 1984. It is proscribed as a terrorist group by Turkey, the European Union and the United States. Lina Serinzatut, The Report.
Joining me to discuss the situation is Dr. Rebwar Fatah, who's the Managing Director of Middle East Consultancy Services. Dr. Fatah, welcome to the programme. Do you think that this new PKK offensive is because they're trying to take advantage of chaos in the Turkish military in the wake of the coup?
It's plausible, but the peace process now collapsed. So the Turkish army bombs the PKK bases in Kandil, in northern Iraq, and also in Turkey. So we will see more of this conflict, but more this killing, of course. It probably doesn't make a headline when the Turkish troops kill the PKK insurgents. However, when the PKK kills the Turkish soldiers, it is the headline, because I guess the PKK being classified as a terrorist organization.
How much damage has been done to the Turkish military by the quite substantial removal of senior officers in the wake of the coup?
I believe the Turkish army and the Turkish state has been shaken by the military, no doubt about that. And really, the credibility of the Erdogan administration is under strong question, because Erdogan has no excuse for reforming the army. They have AKP party has been in the government since 2002. So since then, they haven't managed to reform the military, and we can actually see an attempted military coup in Turkey. It shows that Erdogan administration is very, very weak, and I think Erdogan is a loner these days. He lost all his friends, including his former prime minister. That's why probably he's trying to make up with Russia and Assad and Israel. To me, Erdogan is doing like a total U-turn from his foreign policy, and that's why the Prime Minister Davutoglu resigned.
And do you think, therefore, that if the Turkish military is weakened, and if we're seeing a PKK offensive in response to that, they've got a chance of making some sort of inroads into the political authority of the government that they couldn't make before?
I believe that is true. There is no doubt the Turkish military is much weaker, and there is no doubt there is a strong gap between the government or the civil administration and the military. The remaining military personnel or high-ranking military personnel in the Turkish army, for the time being, they are quiet, but I am sure they don't enjoy seeing their colleagues being treated the way we have seen. They kept in shirts and things like that. And I think the short answer is the Turkish state is in a mess, no doubt about that, and the Turkish military is very weak now comparing to comparing previous.
One of the accusations that apparently the people who were attempting the coup against President Erdogan were wanting to make was that he'd in some way acted treacherously in opening negotiations in the past with the PKK. So can we take it from that that the plotters were a more hardline section of the military, even than Erdogan, who's looked pretty hardline in recent years anyway?
I think that's pretty accurate. I don't think military wants any peace, or I don't forget about the peace. They just don't want really to Kurds to exist. And I think that having the Kurdish issue in Turkey, it was great for military because they stay as probably the most prominent power in the country. They always have this. It could have been imaginary, but nonetheless, the enemy that they were fighting and they was becoming like the Kurds being seen. It's not only the PKK really. It's the Kurds have been seen as a terrorist and they break up the country. But as we see now, for the first time, Kurds are not the only terrorists in the country. The military is, and the Gulen movement are also, members of the Gulen movement are also joining that club. So that has definitely weakened the Turkish state, I believe.
Dr. Fatah, do you think that now the authority of the Kurdish movement is beginning to increase because it looks as if whatever else happens in Syria, there may be an autonomous Kurdish region emerge in Syria?
I mean, that's a really very important question because the current U-turn in Turkish foreign or maybe not Turkish in Erdogan's foreign policy can be seen in that context because Erdogan or Turkey likes it or not, there is now more or less internationally recognized Kurdish political entity. That's like a very broad name in northern Syria known as Rojava. And Rojava is actually, in terms of land, it's bigger than what's controlled by Assad regime. And we have seen the American support for this political entity. Maybe Erdogan wants to go having peace with, or making up with Russia in order to eliminate that political entity. I don't know how far he can go on that basis. And also trying to make up with Assad. The main problem with Erdogan and also with the Turkish state in general, they cannot escape the Kurdophobia without solving the Kurdish issue, and first of all, without admitting that there's an issue, it's called Kurdish issue in Turkey. It will be very difficult to move forward. And I think Erdogan is facing that. It doesn't really. Before Erdogan in the previous elections used the Kurdish issue because, let us not forget, the Kurdish voters, substantial number of votes. They have substantial number of voters. And before in the previous election, because Kurds are also very religious people, he used his Quran and his religion in order to attack Kurds. And I think in one occasion, he claimed to be the only Kurdish political party because he had more Kurdish MPs than the Kurdish groups themselves. And that was very successful. But sadly, Erdogan couldn't really keep his promise and keep the peace process going.
Dr. Fatah, one last question. So would any peace in Syria, which involved an autonomous Kurdish region, be more dangerous to the Turkish state than the continued war?
From the Turkish point of view, yes, it will be very dangerous because I think that the Turkish general made it clear that they don't tolerate the Kurdish state or the Kurdish political entity, even if it's in Brazil. So it just seems to me that it's very sad to see that the Turkish state, with all its complexion and with all its different groups, they just cannot get over that there is a Kurdish issue in that region and it really must be solved. Because we like to or not, Kurds, wherever they are, whether it's Iraq, Syria, or Turkey, or Iran, they can be a stabilizing or a destabilizing factor. And there's no doubt, these states must bite the bullet and just admit there is an issue, it must be solved. And the solution of the Kurdish issue must really start from the constitution, as we see in Iraq. I'm not saying the Kurdish issue is solved in Iraq, but there are major steps in Iraq, but not in Turkey. And the solution in Syria now, we don't know what's going to happen because the entire region is very fragile and the political, if there's such a thing, political process in Syria.
Okay.
Really.
Dr. Rebwar Fatah, thanks very much for joining us, but I'm afraid we'll have to leave that discussion there. But before we go